I know it's taken me a long time to get round to the Wood Elf formations video, but I honestly thought there wouldn't be that much to talk about. This actually became the most difficult formation guide to make to date, purely because the Wood Elves thrive off situational armies to deal with a variety of scenarios. There isn't just an I win button for each setup, there is a variety of enemies and you get the tools to deal with them. Now if you've seen the Wood Elf Mastery Guide, you know that strong Wood Elf play isn't about painting the map, it's about taking the Underroot system to a brand new tree, destroying the enemies and then gifting those to create a brand new ally who will then give you the bonus to the root system and then quickly be able to afford your Ritual of Rebirth. But the tricky part is each area has its own enemies, and whilst yes we do predominantly revolve around Glade Guard, Way Watchers and Ancient Treemen, there's a bit more to it than that, because those utility units you use and the times you use them will be what turns a good Wood Elf player into an excellent Wood Elf player. So we're going to run through a few basic, easy to make armies and showing which parts to sub out and sub in depending on what you will face at what time of your campaign, and then of course going through each of the legendary lords and how to best fit them out. Just a quick reminder guys, if you are enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps out. Ask any question in the comments, I answer everything. And if you'd like to talk strategy, feel free to join the Discord. Cheers. Alright, I'm going to show you how to build this army, and there's interchangeable parts here. So if there's one formation you pay attention to, it's this one, and it will, if you've seen other formation videos, it'll hopefully lean on some tropes you've seen before, whilst also opening your mind to other things you might need to trade in. Now sometimes you'll only be able to hire Glade Guard, and if that does happen, let's just start with the traditional double diamond formation, and of course keeping them a bit more further apart so when one gets attacked they don't all get attacked. Now you'll notice that Wood Elves, they stand relatively loose and not completely shoulder to shoulder, and that does mean they take a little bit less damage from area of effect weapons and spells like Burning Head. They definitely can fight a lot better than most other elves. So let's call out 5, 6, 7, 1 diamond, 2 diamond, and then a backline. And no one should have skirmish mode on at any time, and guard mode should be on default. Always check your options and make sure those defaults are there. Now we also have 2 skirmish cavalry, and these you do want skirmish mode on, and if in doubt, even just having them up here to harass the enemy, you can always run them back, but they can be absolutely invaluable. Now at the front, the best lord they have by far is the Ancient Treeman, able to smash like an absolute wrecking ball, as well as access to the Law of Life. This is one of the best lord choices in the entire game, and unless you're fighting the forest, in which case sometimes a Glade Lord can be better, in any other scenario, this isn't just their best choice, it's one of the best choices in the game. Make sure you use it. And let's put away Stalker, a hybrid infantry hero, they're okay. And then a captain, these are very, very good, and you want levels on them. So you'll often have the chance in a crisis to hire one of each hero. You'll usually have at least a barracks handy because you want lots of captains. They're very nice to have. And branch wraiths, you'll usually have access to them because their building will increase the rate that your tree repairs. So that building is kind of an auto include. But sometimes you will fight things like orcs, goblins. You'll need some stopping power. They will overrun your elves. You won't be able to outfight them. So in this case, put 3 Azray Spear War Dancers. Make sure you choose the Spear variant. Yes, they don't have shields, but they're meant to be more aggressive. They do armor piercing damage, and they've got really good melee defense. Just make sure that they can't outrange you. They shouldn't be able to, your Wood Elves, but in the event you're fighting, say, lots of undead, fighting goblins, orcs, even chaos in this case, where you won't be able to kill them in time because they have armor, get 3 melee units. Later in the campaign, you can trade these out for Blade Singers. Whether you use them or not depends on your enemy. Sometimes more arrows with Wood Elves is actually the best port of call. Any unit that you can't fill, just replace with Glade Guard, right? So when in doubt, Glade Guard, and just put them on the flanks with skirmish mode on if in doubt, okay? We're going to move forward just a bit to give our ranged units a bit of a better chance to see. Now you'll find if you have skirmish mode on, we've got Hagbane tips by the way, so that will slow their units down. Exactly what we want, not what they want, but you'll find sometimes you get cornered. So you need to turn skirmish mode off. Let's focus down these units because they're all in range. Good. You don't want to fire with these back ones until the enemy is within their range. You don't want your units walking over your own. Okay, so there's our War Dancers. They're close enough. Get the charge. I can see they might flank us, so let's move this branch wraith down, and we're going to charge ahead with our captain. let's send our ancient treemen into their lord. And there's a chance to use some magic. They're all blobbed up. Let's take it. Cool. Okay, so they've won that engagement. Let's focus down. Remember, focusing down a unit will help kill it way, way quicker. Okay, cool. So we're about to get flanked here. We have a few choices, but we might need to make a line. Now, these guys are not a hybrid infantry unit, but they can actually hang way better than any other elven unit. So they're typical good at shooting, not good at melee. Not always the case with Wood Elves. Wood Elves are pretty savage. So, I mean, look at their stats. They've got a base 27 melee defense. Pretty damn good for an archer. And when you set the enemy up, you can set them up for nice things like Awakening of the Wood, Pendulum, just whatever you need. And that's another advantage of bringing melee troops if you do bring them. But just remember, they're there to hold the line. They're not there to do damage. But they do have armor piercing. So, as a cavalry deterrent, they are more than sufficient. So you can choose to move around behind and then attack. Don't just move through your own units. Waypoint them so they get that rear charge and lower their melee defense by 2/3 if you can get that back shot. Okay, there we are. Now, in a situation like this, they might be inclined to stand on top of each other. Just take a moment sometimes to move your troops if they're standing on top of each other, just like that. They can't block your shots if they're not facing you. So if you see them running into another unit and exposing their backs, that is when you land your arrows. But often your units won't want to fire at when they think they might get friendly fire. So sometimes the best thing is to run them away from the unit and then they'll take the shot. Now they're starting to shoot. See? So they will avoid friendly fire. They do not want to get their mates. If you get the chance, having one row of them with the poison arrows will slow the enemy down. So if you're versing cavalry, get the poison arrows or any fast unit. So Skaven, Hagbane tips can be very, very useful. But with the cavalry units, as you saw, I always bring the cavalry with Hagbane tips because it'll slow the enemy by 1/3. Meaning that you can disrupt them a bit more. It brings them a bit more piecemeal towards your army so you can take them apart one at a time, and it just gives you some more options. Now, if you're versing dwarfs or any heavily armored unit, this is not an ideal setup. Give them the Starfire shards. Even if you only disband them after that battle, the armor piercing these guys do is the best you can do. Do not hire melee units to do your armor piercing with the elves. Way Watchers are more worth your time and long-term investment, but if you do need armor piercing right then and there, get Starfire shards, and if possible, Hagbane tips. Now, if you want an endgame army that won't send you broke, but can handle virtually anything, this is the one I recommend. I like to have two relatively wide spread as they go, hollow diamonds, and let's place them next to each other. We need a single unit of Glade Guard, and in the middle of all of them, we're going to place a Waste Stalker because of his amazing ability to increase their armor piercing damage by 25%. So we'll keep him there, and let's hotkey him let's call him number 2. Okay, so he's basically there to buff and then charge in once the enemy gets too close. At the very front of the formation, we're going to place 2 treemen on one side, 2 treemen on the other side, including our Lord, which of course is a ancient treeman. Branch wraiths, excellent casters, and of course in your army they can replenish, they can do so much. So keep them here, they'll be another deterrent from anything that gets too close to you. And this army, let's highlight all of these units and we're going to turn them onto skirmish mode, but these 2, we're going to leave manual, and you'll see why. The reason being is we want them to act as a pseudo line holder. So these Way Watchers are kind of our bold last line of defense. So let's see how this works, because we now at each flank are going to have a captain on an eagle and then a spell slinger capable of raining damage down. And if we can't get the engagement started, these 2 eagle units will allow that to happen. Alright, so moving across. So this is just a custom battle, by the way, just for the sake of demonstration. And the best thing is we can just keep on moving if we want, because the Way Watchers have fire while shooting. Now this unit here did not have skirmish mode on, and now we see the benefit of that. He'd be pushing back and everyone would be running away right now. So by him holding the line, we're going to do a bit better. So let's send this treeman into that flank. And having a captain can be very useful because they can dive in and just buy you a little bit more time where you need it most. That branch wraith doing a great job of pinning an entire unit down. Okay, let's focus the enemy down where we can. So we're just keeping our eye on these individual units and doing everything we can to stop them from getting to our ranged units. When you get the chance, you can use your Glade Captain as well to cycle charge into the rear of enemy units. Very, very handy. And remember, these guys still have skirmish mode on, so if this unit here breaks, the rest will kite away. And just Treeman is so good at just pinning the enemy in place, allowing you to work around them. Getting rear charges just like that. And there we go. Now the best thing is about Weight Watchers is they can shoot and move, so we can chase after their entire army. So let's just move them up in that general direction. And now that we have time, Control A to select all, turn off guard mode. Now choose one at a time to go through each of our units to make sure they're paired up with someone, so they'll chase them to the depths of hell. Once you've completed a Ritual of Rebirth, there are several amazing amber requiring researches you can choose from. Most of them will revolve around bolstering your units, but the one that I really had a lot of fun with was this. It doesn't seem like much, a bit of growth to power up those forests, but most importantly, -1 local recruitment time. Given that a single forest has to do all the recruitment in an area, that's actually pretty good. Starting off with Taliesin, helmed by Orion, and this is a faction that I highly recommend any Wood Elf player starts off with. Your priority should be to unify Athalloran and then get the Witchwood as soon as possible. Doing the Ritual of Rebirth there will give you access to Ariel, and she is amazing, especially when coupled with Orion. She is an excellent spellcaster, but more importantly, she specializes in amping up Sisters of Thorn, javelin-based skirmish cavalry, and this is a unit you can kind of sleep on, but in her army, they are very, very fun to use. Now, again, you don't need to spam it. I don't like spamming in my armies. This is what I believe to be the most fun and entertaining late game army with Orion. Now, why do we have the stags? This is only a CT unit typically. Well, under Orion there, because he gives an extra 20% weapon strength as well as an extra 8 charge bonus. Not to mention when Ariel is around, he provides an aura of +15 physical resistance. Very nice, and this is why you should pair them up in the most amazing marriage, which allows cavalry to actually be pretty good. Normally, I don't use these units, but this is what I love about this game. The right lords and the right pairing make units you would never normally touch really good, and you just explore the game to a whole new depth. Now, the other unit he buffs that really isn't very good is the Wildwood Rangers, and I normally would never bring these guys, but honestly, why not? They got 50 armor, which is actually really high for a Wood Elf. They're very opposed to clothing. Of course, Weight Watchers are your late game staple. They can fire 360 degrees, more accurate than any other archer. Missile strength is insane, just so powerful. Waystalkers are a hero that you sometimes find a difficult time finding useful, but this is a pretty damn nice one, and this frees your captains up for formations you will see very soon. Pinning the enemy in place and stripping away 20% missile resistance, this is a death sentence. Now this is a late game trample using some late game cavalry with Orion because it's fun, but we're also going to utilize War Dancers because he makes them a little bit tougher, and you know, it really can't hurt this formation. If they do crowd around the Weight Watchers, this will give you a bit of room, but also they can act as an anvil for our heavy cavalry. Sisters of Thorn being a hybrid missile throwing javelin, they can also charge in pretty damn well as well. So having some melee infantry when you're using cavalry to provide an anvil for the hammer absolutely can have some benefit. Now, if you're playing defensively, you can have the Sister of Thorn basically next to and in line with your army to dart to the sides of the map and then around to envelop the enemy from the back and pepper them with javelins. But instead, I would normally recommend up here using your vanguard deployment to start kiting away, raining down some damage and softening up those targets that you really don't want to get any closer. And this is also a good way to maybe stretch out the enemy, send the enemy kiting away with a feigned retreat. They're never going to catch these mighty horsemen, and then the rest of the army will have a bit less force when they finally reach your main army. When I move my cavalry, just take note, notice how I'm always reforming my lines by pressing and holding the right hand mouse button. Sometimes you want them to be shoulder to shoulder to get around some maybe narrow terrain. Other times you want them to be a nice wide gun line to get the maximum damage saturation, and this will also make them less susceptible to area of effect spells and of course any artillery they might have. If they do have artillery, you'd want to flank around and target that first. When they're already in an optimal wide formation and I want to kite the enemy, I'm not just clicking, I'm pressing and holding the left hand mouse button and Alt together to move that formation forward and back, and you can tilt it a little bit if you also hold down Control. But this is a great way of kiting the enemy and not having your horse archers just blob up on top of each other, obstruct each other, and this same philosophy can be used for setting up charges with cavalry or any other unit. As the bulk of their forces approach our main formation, you notice that the Way Watchers are staying in place. I have got them on my default, which is skirmish mode off. I don't want this formation to kite away because we want this to be an anvil and set up opportunity for our heavy cavalry. Still in reserve, we have our great stag cavalry. You only ever want 2 units of these, absolute most, but the buffs that they have provided, one charge can absolutely wreck some heavy infantry, and it is a lot of fun. Again, not necessary, but hey, you want to play with a bit of variety, and against certain setups, this will do very well for you. Against Chaos Warriors, where they have a lot of heavy elite infantry, that's a really nice unit that'll clean up. Unfortunately, nothing will beat Way Watchers. They just shred armor piercing. They can hold decently in melee, at least survive long enough for another unit of Way Watchers to absolutely wreck. Here come the great stag cavalry, just smashing the hell out of what's left of that unit. And just remember, holding Alt and right click with the ranged units will allow them to dive into melee. This will mean they can chase an enemy down and off the map if you drop guard mode, and sometimes you want to just keep pushing that really deadly unit out of the way. And once the battle is nearly over, again, you can hold Alt and left click and move your entire Way Watcher formation up, and this is one of the most devastating formations just to progress up the battlefield. Their units have very low mass and can get bullied quite easily by bigger, stronger units in strong formations. So this is why it's so important to have big, powerful frontliners like Orion, like Treemen, if they can live long enough to get close to you. But the best thing to do with Wood Elves is to kill them so they never get close, and if they get too close, run away and kill some more. As you move the formation up, you will start to get some 360-degree arrows of death just raining down in all directions. The bound abilities of the Sister of Thorn are doubled with Ariel in the army, and they can do an excellent debuff, helping you to delete that annoying Lord or hero with arrows. If your Way Watchers are just getting out-muscled and beat up in melee, send a Sister of Thorn across and then cast damage reflection on them and help them stand up for themselves. I just want to quickly touch on a massive misconception with Orion's faction ability, which lowers the upkeep cost for every war he's in. This does not mean you want to go around starting wars with absolutely everyone just to lower your upkeep. What you do want to use this for is to join wars. So don't just start wars, join wars to build up your rapport that you know you don't likely need to fight. And for example, just say we didn't already have a military alliance, we could join this war with the Puppets of Misrule, and that is another war that will help lower upkeep. But ideally, we don't want to be painting the map. We want to basically get this self-sustained with military allies so they can govern it, whilst we reap the benefits of having the forests, which are what provide us with all of our wealth and military power. And I'm more than happy to make a lot of money and afford our expensive tree upgrades. You'll notice in that formation I used Way Stalkers. This hero is probably their least most powerful. However, always get Tempered Rigor with all of your heroes. This is just an insane buff to their abilities. They're a bit squishy, they don't have a lot of armor, but they're very, very hard to hit. Think of a ninja that's not wearing a lot of armor. More importantly, Sight Beyond Sight will give you a plus 15% base missile damage, and this will help your Way Watchers punch a bit harder. If the enemy gets too close, fire some arrows of Kernos and send this guy into melee. The best non-caster hero is absolutely the Glade Captain. You can actually put some decent armor on them, give them some good hit points, of course Tempered Rigor to boost their stats to the roof, but possessed by the Trickster God, an aura of plus 10 melee defense. This is why I like to ride them with Hawk Riders, using this ability, which will give the Hawk Riders fear. You'll see in the upcoming formation that this is amazing just to quickly terror out the enemy off the map with my favorite unit, which is the Hawk Riders, full bias disclosed. Many believe the Branch Wraith is the strongest Wood Elf hero. It provides replenishment to your army, as well as an aura similar to that of the Captain, but this one bolsters melee attack. This guy is actually a pretty decent line holder with 90 armor, better hit points than any elf, and a good plethora of spells, including the Mighty Earthblighter to heal yourself, Awakening of the Woods for Blob, and if you want to score across a front line of enemies, Pendulum has you covered. All of these combine to make Branch Wraith the go-to line holder on the ground. Whilst the Spellweaver hero variant does bring a ton of magical power, it's really easy to get a lot of magic in your Wood Elf armies thanks to their hero. So she's a bit outclassed, but the Spell Singer, the hero variant, is very, very good. Your typical dedicated caster, squishy even for a Wood Elf, but that doesn't matter, flying on a great eagle, raining spells down from above. back to our next faction, the Sisters of Twilight. I really love their faction. It focuses on air units, which I've always been a fan of, and Volley of Kernos for Hawk Riders. Just very powerful. It just makes my favorite unit in their roster even better. The Sisters themselves provide a charge bonus and melee attack bonus to all flying units, and their unique tree just makes them even tougher to take down. Buffs to growth and diplomacy, extra movement range, they just become absolutely insane and very, very difficult to kill. But more importantly, we get an extra 10% reduction to flying units, Vanguard deployment, and 10% physical resistance for flying units. So very good, very powerful, and you'll see this is what I'm going to build the formation around. But when leveling them up, just make sure you still focus around Glade Guard. They are your early workhorse. Hawk Riders are quite a micro-intensive unit, and they can be absolutely awful if you don't know how to use them. So I'm going to share my favorite combo in this, which is the Hawk Squad, and that is just one captain with 2 or 3 Hawk Rider units. Now, just like you saw with the cavalry, we don't just move them up, we stretch them out, and what we do is we stretch an entire line to make them wide around a singular target, and then hold Alt and right-click after they've fired their arrows, so they can all pounce in at once, and that is attacking at 360 degrees by savage hawks. The bonus from the captain increases their melee defense, means they're not taking damage, and that captain also granting fear, allowing the unit to break, keep them in there 10 seconds tops, then rapidly wiggle right click left and right to get the hawks out, back in the air, so you can do it all again. Now, with any other Wood Elf army, Ancient Treemen are by far the best choice and a better choice than the Forest Dragon because they have more presence and will pin the enemy in place, allowing you to surround, envelop, and then just pin them down with arrows, spells, and all those amazing abilities. But the Sisters of Twilight are the best aerial faction out of all the Elven races, and it's not even close. So, we are using Forest Dragons, 2 Hollow Diamonds in the middle, 1 more unit of Way Watchers, and our trusty Way Stalker, providing an extra 15% piercing damage from our ranged units. And all of these we are going to place on skirmish mode, so they start to move back. Now, on the front corner of each of our flanks, basically being the Wrecking Ball, is going to be a Forest Dragon on each side, and in the center we have the Sisters of Twilight on their Forest Dragon. Now you can ride them on their Eagle, and sometimes it's better to do so. The Eagle is very nimble, able to smash damage down from above with their cluster shot, but you can also summon the dragon when you play as the Sister of Twilight. But we've confederated them in this game, which also means we can't use Arrows of Kernos with our Hawk Riders, and I'm going to show you that they're still amazing without it. Let's debunk that right now, that they're only good with Sister of Twilight. So, in reserve, slightly off to the side, we're going to place 1 captain and 3 Hawk Riders, and on the other flank, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're slightly tilted this way, so we get the advantage to wipe out most of one half of their army before the other one can engage. So I'm using the Alt key as well, but drawing lines with your aerial units is very, very useful as well to keep them nimble and keep them mobile. Man, these guys are just not wanting to engage. So we're going to use our Dragon Breath on their ranged units first. So what you do is you draw a really big line around the back of them so we can get behind them, and we are going to terror out the crap out of these guys. We group both of our Way Stalkers so we can cast Arrow of Kernos, doing that amazing damage. Alright. Okay, we're going to hold Alt and then just dive in the rear of this unit, and that unit is going to break very quickly, and we've just disabled one of their only ranged units, one of their only means of hurting us. Make sure you have the cluster shot on with the Sisters of Twilight. It does way more damage. And our trusty Way Watchers are kiting back. As obnoxious as can be, you will lose friends. If you use this against a human player, you will lose friends. Or this will really test you. Now, the significance of the Forest Dragons in this army is you will often have some large single entities or just a really aggressive unit that you just need to just bulldoze and send a Wrecking Ball into, and then pile in the Hawk Riders like you see here around them. Like that. So fire, then dive, and just watch them absolutely crap themselves. It's just amazing. Now, Now it's time for the beloved Optimus tree face, Durthu, the gigantic tree spirit, and boy is this guy loved, and I can see why. You get to start off as a freaking treeman, and he's pretty damn cool. Faction-wide, if you play as him, you are of course very incentivized to make a very treekin focused army, but honestly, his stat line asks you to do that as well, and that's how you should roll it with him, but you shouldn't just completely ignore elves in the early game. Even just 6 elves can really help you. You'll have your front line, there's only so much flanking you can do. Yes, build yourself around these key units and make them the cornerstone of what you do, but don't ignore the other tools at your disposal. All of his forest spirits enjoy a 30% upkeep reduction. All tree units get a buff or a debuff, just really great stuff. So his other ability is the aspect, so you can affix 1 of 3 potential upgrades to your units, and I'll show you in the upcoming formation. We choose the one that is most relevant to where that unit will be standing in the formation, not just really that unit's type. He's very strong at defending the forest with extra melee defense and extra physical resistance. He of course buffs treekin units and dryads, and everyone seems to sleep on the fact he can cast Wissen's Wild Form for basically next to nothing, increasing his damage and survivability by 25%. On the battlefield with Durthu, we have a front row of 3 treekin. Each of these has the aspect to the willow, the bonus to melee defense, and bonus versus infantry. Perfect placement for them, so when the enemy crashes into us, we have these guys tying up and battling the infantry, holding the line, and over the top, we'll sail some arrows and being able to dive into the sides there. We have these guys, if anything does get through, they will absorb the charge bonus. Off to the sides here, we have our first round of reserves, and we have some dryads. You could replace them with treekin as well. Each of them has the aspect of the birch, which will increase their speed and armor-piercing damage at the expense of physical resistance, but this is why they're not in the front row, but it'll give them some much-needed foot speed. At 47, pretty good for a monstrous infantry unit, but also this unit has mass. Look how many more units we have. We can stretch them out quite far, and you will want a bit of mass, so this does help with not getting flanked. And in the rear, we of course in our final reserves, and this does form our primary reserve, we have the treekin as well with increased armor piercing damage plus 12 and some extra speed, so when the battle is all engaged, we know we can't get flanked. We are going to send these guys around the flanks every single time. Oh my god, they've got a catapult. Okay, well this was poorly planned. Alright, we're moving up, lads. Change of plan. I loaded this save, I made this up last night thinking, yep, I'm going to do this tomorrow. I forgot to look at their army, so we should have been charging this straight away. Let's move up. Now we've got a bit of cover with the trees here that we can utilize. Okay, so remember, holding Alt to move as much of the fixed formation in place. Do not lose your cohesion when moving up. Now this is one of the toughest things that can have happen, because we have something splitting our enemy. We don't have any cavalry. A bit more high level, we would have this spell singer on a mount, and she could target that catapult. We don't have that, so we need to intercept. This is actually going to be a really freaking hard battle now. Okay, charging our treekin into the sides, into the flanks. Storm Vermin, normally a very dangerous unit, but one we're not too afraid of because we have the tools to deal with them. Now when you see a lot of units engaged with one unit, don't just pile into there. Move around and get the flank. Get the charge. As the enemy breaks, let's move up. We need to take the high ground. Oh shit, okay, that second army is on its way. Okay, now this is the hardest part, is that we need to unite our army. Our army is split. We are most vulnerable here. So we need to take this high ground. I'm trying to use magic too much so we don't, so we actually depend on our units. Okay, Icaclaw is taking on Durthu, which I don't think is the smartest thing he's ever done, but now this is why I have my units hotkeyed, so we can just quickly dart around the map using any special abilities. Very useful with spells. Now we do need to use some magic here because we are getting leveled pretty badly. Don't put too many units on a single target. Find a unit which has a good engagement and then pair them up like this. I'm making some of these movements a bit more exaggerated so you can see what's going on, because this is a bit of a cluster. Now these archers are too close, let's move them around. Overall really good, and if we had even ground, we would have certainly been able to defend them, but that was actually a way more interesting battle, so cool. And next we have Drycha, and she of course is incredibly unique. Her elves are glamoured, which means they literally under a spell where they think that they're serving Ariel and not this evil twig of death. But, well, they don't have as good stats, you can use them, and I do recommend having a few in your armies, like even just a unit of 4, to volley over and get a bit of damage saturation. But as you level up, you will be more and more inclined to put your points into things like a Root of Woe to make her a bit more of a beat stick. If you do want elves in her army, she does reduce the penalty from them being glamoured, but more importantly, Befuddled of Mischiefs pins an enemy in place and allows you to swarm them with your nasty beasties, and of course getting better branch wraiths. You can't argue with that. They're already an excellent, one of the best heroes, maybe their best hero. Getting Frenzy on your beast units and Dark Heart will increase their charge bonus and their speed, a bit of armor piercing damage as well. Now they become proper glass cannon units, so you want big burly tree units, dryads, treekin, hold the enemy in place, move around, and then just maul them. So add on the battlefield. Let's break this one down one piece at a time. So our very front line is going to be 3 units. In the middle, we have the Aspects of Oak, which increase the armor and provided a charge defense against large. Front and center, this Dryad unit. Okay, so that's the increased armor, so it will hold longest. We want that to hold because it's our center. We can't have it fall apart because this is a melee setup. Now on one flank, we're going to use the Aspect of the Willow, which increases melee defense and gives a bit of anti-infantry, and that again is on the other side. So this is our front line. Now in the gaps, we're just placing our heroes. It doesn't really matter where you put them, but up in the front and center is where you want your most burly, i.e. your treeman, and of course your hero. Now going back the next notch, in this gap here, you'll notice we have Aspect of the Birch, increasing their foot speed with a bit more armor piercing damage. So once these are tangled, then smash in and use that armor piercing damage. Behind that front row on one side, well actually on each side, we're going to have another unit of Dryads with the melee defense upgrade. So this can turn sideways if we get flanked or help to envelop the enemy. This is quite a narrow map, so we are stacking ourselves like this because if it was a bit wider, we could consider having these units out to the side, and these of course are Drycha's favorite beasties. We have spiders and bears. The spiders also dealing armor piercing damage, slowing the enemy with poison, so they're very good at chasing down an enemy and bringing them down speed wise. Buying enough time for our bears, which is still pretty fast mind you, 83 speed, to come in and do some really big damage. And of course they bring anti-large to the table, so if you had more space you could consider having these here, but I'd have them back slightly so you can pick those favorable engagements. Now behind them, we're just going to place one unit of Dryads, and you're probably wondering why we have just a singular unit. Well, if this was a ranged army and they had lots of arrows, this is a really good time to just get a single melee unit and just drive it up, run straight up against their archers. As they start to crash their melee units towards you, send a melee unit up and their archers will really start to get a bit nervous and start running away, stopping them from firing, giving you some much needed breathing room if they are a ranged based army. They are dwarfs normally, they do have good range. This is not a great army, so this shouldn't be too hard. On one flank we have a flying unit being our captain, and on the other we have our feral manticore. It's good to have a flying unit on the edges of the formations. It just gives you a bit of breathing room and you can scout out the enemy. Let's use our summon. Time to move down. Let's Control A and move the whole formation up. Okay, well, there's a gap here. Let's stretch these units up to set up the flank, choosing units to jump into the back of. Now this is where having flying units is useful. We can see they have some well defended range units. I didn't want to have to use this reinforcing army, but let's bring it up just in case. Oh wow, look at those blasting charges really hurting. Cool, okay, so we stopped them from shooting. Now, this is one thing I like to do. I like to try and stretch. So click once, hold shift and alt and charge in. Okay, we only need one unit to pin this enemy in place. We could get a charge by dropping our summons at the rear of that formation. Let's charge in, very good. And if you're getting a bit overwhelmed, just take the time to go across your units and go, well, there's a spell there, there's a blob there, let's cast. So just calmly and methodically go through your units and decide what you should do. Just remember, the summon is really, really handy for getting flanks off, but if they ever leave their artillery unattended, really great. Just drop it down and tear the artillery to pieces. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, sharing, subbing. It really does help a lot. If you haven't checked out the Discord or Patreon, feel free to do that. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next, what faction, what video type. Are you enjoying the new format? The longer videos, shorter videos? Let me know, and I'll see you next time.